Okay, so picture this. You have a leaky faucet in your kitchen. Annoying, right?
Yeah, that's super annoying.
You call a plumber, you fix it. Done. Now imagine a single solution that claims to fix not just that leaky faucet, but war, pollution, crime, loneliness, and get this, the very nature of death itself.
It sounds like the back of a very, very ambitious sci-fi novel, doesn't it?
It really does. But that is exactly what we're looking at today. We're doing a deep dive into a text called "The Mode of the New Oasis for Life Will Solve 21 Difficulties That Mankind is Facing."
It was written by an author named Xuefeng back in June of 2020.
And honestly, ambitious might be the understatement of the century here.
I would agree. I've read a lot of utopian manifestos, and they usually focus on like one or two big things.
Right, economics or the environment.
Exactly. But this text, it brings a laundry list. It identifies 21 specific difficulties and just says point blank, we have the blueprint to fix all of them.
And it's not just a theory. The author calls this the life-genuine vision. He uses all these terms like New Eden Garden or even Xuefeng-style communism.
Yeah, the labels are interesting.
But before we get bogged down in the labels,
Yeah.
I just want to focus on the promise itself. Because the level of confidence in this writing is, it's absolutely off the chart.
That is the first thing that strikes you, isn't it? There is zero hesitation. The author frames this new oasis not as a possibility, but almost like an engineering manual for society, a mechanism.
So our mission today is to see if we can kind of reverse engineer that manual. We're going to break these 21 claims down into 3 big buckets.
Okay.
First, we'll look at the social stuff, how this oasis supposedly changes our daily lives, our families. Then the bigger systems, money, government, law.
The macro level.
Exactly. And finally, we have to talk about the ending because it gets metaphysical in a way I really did not see coming.
And that structure is important because the author seems to suggest you can't have one without the others. The social changes enable the political ones, which in turn lead to the spiritual ones. It's all connected.
Okay, so let's start on the ground level, the micro changes. Daily life. One of the first claims that really made me pause was about women. The text says this mode will free women from their daily trivial chores forever.
Forever.
Now, as someone who spent an hour doing laundry yesterday, that sounds great. But practically speaking, how? Who does the dishes if women aren't doing them?
And that is the key question. The text doesn't really describe, a robot butler in every home. Instead, it implies a fundamental shift in where and how we live.
Look.
If you look at the whole life-genuine or Oasis model, it's all about communal living. It suggests that the nuclear family unit, mom, dad, kids, private house, ribbit kitchen, that whole structure is being dismantled.
So instead of 10 million women cooking 10 million separate dinners in 10 million separate kitchens.
You have a communal dining hall. You have a centralized team handling the laundry. The trivial chores disappear for the individual because they're absorbed by the collective infrastructure.
It turns domestic labor from a private burden into like a public utility.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the next group of people the text focuses on, the elderly. I think for most people, the fear of aging is really a fear of 2 things, running out of money and being alone.
Right, and the text addresses both of those head on. It claims the elderly will lead their happiest lives, regardless of whether they have children or pensions.
That's a huge statement. Regardless of whether they have children. Because right now, in so many cultures, your children are your retirement plan.
They are, and if you don't have children or if you're estranged from them, you're often in real trouble. Xuefeng is proposing a system that decouples care from biology.
How so?
In this new oasis, the community itself takes on the role of the dutiful child. It's basically saying, you don't need to produce your own offspring to guarantee your safety. The oasis is the safety net.
It feels like there's a theme here of breaking that biological link, because the next claim is about children. The text says the phenomenon of orphans will disappear forever.
Now, obviously, that doesn't mean parents stop dying. Biology is biology.
Right, of course. Tragedy still happens.
But the concept of an orphan, a child left alone, unsupported, without resources, that concept is what vanishes. In this model, every child is the child of the community.
So they all get the same education, the same care.
The same love, yeah. Regardless of who their biological parents are, or if those parents are even still around.
It's the ultimate, it takes a village approach, just, codified into law. And this seems to lead into the claims about loneliness and violence. The text says people remaining unattached and lonely will disappear.
And in the same breath, it says domestic violence will disappear completely.
How does that work?
Well, think about the root causes of domestic violence. It's complex, obviously, but it's so often made worse by financial stress, by isolation, that sort of pressure cooker environment of the private home. If you remove the financial stress, because resources are guaranteed, and you remove the isolation by living communally, you are changing the environment where that violence typically grows.
So the argument is that loneliness and domestic abuse are structural problems, not just personal ones. And if you fix the structure, this Oasis model, the problems dissolve.
Exactly. The author is betting that human behavior is largely a product of its environment. You change the tank, and the fish behave differently.
Okay, so that's the home life. We've got communal living, shared responsibilities, no lonely elderly people. But you can't run a society like that without a massive overhaul of the rules. We have to talk about the macro.
The governance. This is where the text moves from, let's say, lifestyle design to really radical political theory.
Radical is the word. The text says political parties will have no purpose, and the competition between them will just disappear.
To understand that, we have to ask, what are political parties for? In our world, they're basically vehicles for competing interests. Group A wants resources here, Group B wants them over there.
Right, it's a constant tug of war.
But the new Oasis claims to solve the distribution problem itself. So if everyone's needs are already being met by the system, well, the tug-of-war rope is cut. The author argues that political parties would become like an appendix.
A vestigial organ.
A vestigial organ. It serves no function, so it just withers away.
And it's not just internal politics, it's global. The text claims border disputes will cease to exist, and this is a big one. Military expenditures will drop to zero.
Zero.
Not cut in half. Zero.
Because there are no militaries. The text envisions a world where the very concept of the nation-state has dissolved. If you have free movement of people, which it also promises,
No visas, no checkpoints.
and you have a unified resource management system, who are you even fighting?
That's a trillions of dollars question right there.
Hmm.
If you stop spending money on tanks and aircraft carriers, where does all that resource go?
Into the Oasis, into the quality of life. It creates a kind of feedback loop.
But wait, how do you pay for all this? This brings us to the economic claim, which I think is going to be the hardest hurdle for a lot of listeners to wrap their heads around. The text says, no wealth disparities will exist, as everyone will have everything, yet own nothing.
Own nothing. That is the phrase that just triggers the alarm bells for most modern people.
Yeah, it sounds like you're stripping everyone of their assets.
So you have to look at the second half of that sentence. Everyone will have everything. Think of it like a library. A really, really high-end library that contains everything in the world.
Okay, I'm with you.
In a library, you don't own the book. You can't sell it. But you have full access to the knowledge and enjoyment of that book whenever you need it.
So the new Oasis just applies that logic to everything. Houses, cars, clothes, tools.
You have access to whatever you need, but you don't possess it as private property.
It's the ultimate subscription economy. You subscribe to life, and the perks are included.
In theory, yes. And the author argues this is the silver bullet for corruption. The text says officials will have neither need nor ways to corrupt.
I guess that makes a certain kind of sense. If I can't accumulate private wealth, if I can't stack cash in a secret bank account or buy a private island because those things don't exist,
Then why would you take a bribe?
there's no point.
Exactly. Corruption is almost always about accumulation. I accumulate power to accumulate wealth for security. If the system guarantees security and removes the mechanism of accumulation, the incentive to be corrupt just evaporates.
It's not that people suddenly become saints. It's that being a sinner isn't profitable anymore.
You've got it.
And if you remove property and money, you apparently remove the need for lawyers. The text says courts and legal systems will die out gradually.
Which is funny, but if you look at civil court dockets today, the vast majority of cases are about property, contracts, money. Remove those, and the docket clears up pretty fast.
The text also says that crime will be reduced by 3/4.
Okay.
I did notice it didn't say 100%.
Which is a rare moment of restraint in this text, actually. It acknowledges there might still be crimes of passion or, irrational behavior, but it argues that 75% of crime is driven by economic desperation or greed.
Remove the desperation, you remove most of the crime.
That's the idea. And vices, too. Drug abuse and gambling are listed as things that will disappear completely.
Gambling is an interesting one.
It is, isn't it? Gambling is driven by the hope of a windfall winning big to change your life. In a world where your life is already guaranteed to be secure and abundant, the thrill of the gamble loses its potency. You can't win more than you already have.
So we've rebuilt the home, we've deleted the military, and we've turned the economy into a global library. But the source text doesn't stop there. It zooms out even further.
Yeah, now we need to talk about the planet.
This is where the new Oasis becomes an ecological restoration project. The claims here are absolute. Atmospheric pollution, water pollution, earth pollution will disappear.
And notice the connection to population. The text says the population will stabilize to be in balance with planetary resources. It's acknowledging that you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet.
So it proposes a managed equilibrium.
Right. But then it gets a little cinematic. It says many lost species will return. Is he talking about Jurassic Park here, or...
I had the same thought.
It's ambiguous. It could mean cloning, or it could just mean that once humanity stops destroying habitats, nature is resilient enough that species we thought were extinct or on the brink can bounce back. It paints a picture of a biosphere that is healing, and healing rapidly.
And the weather. Climatic disasters will no longer occur, and distinct seasons with consistent climate.
That is a massive claim. It implies either some kind of, weather control technology or a spiritual harmony with the planet that somehow stabilizes the climate.
And that phrase, spiritual harmony, is the perfect bridge to the final and honestly the wildest part of this whole text.
Oh, yeah.
Because up until now, we've been talking about making life better on Earth. But that turns out to be just the prep work.
Right. This is the meta level. Why do we need to solve these 21 difficulties? Is it just so we can all relax? No. The text says the goal is sublimation.
Sublimation. In chemistry, that's when a solid turns directly into a gas, skipping the liquid phase entirely.
And here, it's being used metaphorically for the human soul. The text claims that once these difficulties are removed, humanity can finally focus on evolving into higher beings.
It actually lists them. Angels, bodhisattvas, celestial beings, Buddhas.
It's a whole hierarchy of spiritual evolution. The argument is essentially Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but on steroids.
Okay, explain that.
If you're worried about your pension or a war or even just doing the laundry, you don't have the mental or spiritual bandwidth to achieve enlightenment. The new Oasis clears the clutter of mortal existence so you can focus on becoming an angel.
So the reason we free women from chores isn't just for leisure, it's so they have time to become bodhisattvas.
Exactly. The mundane is removed to make space for the divine. The Oasis is an incubator for souls.
And there's a specific statistic here that just blew my mind. The text says at least half of the people will sublimate into these higher beings.
At least half. It puts a number on salvation. It's incredible.
Now, I can hear the skeptics in the audience, and honestly the skeptic in my own head, saying, okay, cool story, but this is pure fantasy.
Of course.
But the author, Xuefeng, he seems to anticipate that. He writes, do not take this as a joke or myth. He claims this model has been existing and developing for 10 years as of 2020.
He calls it firm evidence. He's suggesting that they have actually been running this new Oasis model somewhere, like a prototype community.
So Life Genuine isn't just a book, it's a community.
Yes. And they are arguing that they have data. They're effectively saying, we tried this on a small scale and it worked, so now we are scaling it up to the whole world.
And the tone at the end.
Yeah.
And it's not asking for permission, is it? It says, everything is running according to procedure.
It's deterministic. It views this whole transition not as like a political campaign that might win or lose, but as an inevitable stage of human evolution, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly.
You can't vote against the butterfly.
I can't vote against the butterfly. It's just what happens next.
Running according to procedure.
Yeah.
It's such a bureaucratic way to describe the apocalypse of the old world.
It creates a sense of destiny, doesn't it? It tells the reader that the train has already left the station, so you might as well get on board.
So let's zoom out and just look at the whole picture. We have a blueprint that dismantles the family, abolishes private property and the military, heals the ecosystem, and turns half of us into angels. It's a lot.
It is the ultimate comprehensive solution. It refuses to fix just one thing. It argues that everything from the kitchen sink to the state of your soul is all connected.
But there is one thing that I'm still stuck on, one little loose thread that I think is worth pulling.
What's that?
That statistic. At least half of the people will sublimate. So if the new Oasis works perfectly, poverty is gone, crime is gone, the weather is perfect, and half the population turns into angels and floats off to a higher dimension, what happens to the other half?
That is the lingering question, isn't it? The text implies a a bifurcation of humanity.
Do they just stay behind? Do they hang out in the oasis forever, enjoying the free food and the nice weather, but just never evolving?
Or is there a darker implication? Is the oasis a filter? If the entire purpose of the oasis is to produce Buddhas, what happens to, the failed product? The text leaves that completely open to interpretation.
So it's a paradise for some, and maybe a permanent waiting room for others.
It really forces us to ask, is a perfect society an end in itself? Or is it just a launch pad for something else entirely?
A launch pad for angels. Well, that is certainly something to chew on while you're doing the laundry today.
Indeed.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us into the new Oasis.
It was a fascinating exploration.
We'll catch you on the next one.